My seventh-grade teacher, Miss Zen, had watched 26 children die in a school shooting. She was found doing CPR on their bodies, screaming, "I was supposed to keep you safe." When she became our teacher, she made us practice hiding silently for hours and ranked us by survivor scores. Then she dripped red paint on a crying student and said, "This is what happens to loud children. They leak out and die." After the school shooting at the nearby high school, 26 children were shot dead under the care of their math teacher, Miss Scene. She was found performing CPR on dead children, shouting, "I'm your teacher. I was supposed to keep you safe." 2 months later, she became our seventh-grade teacher. She immediately installed these door stops with her own money. She even created emergency backpacks with first aid supplies. But by the 3rd week, something shifted. She started flinching every time the intercom crackled on. She pressed herself against the wall and her eyes went wide until the principal finished announcing picture day. Nobody said anything, but everyone was thinking the same thing: PTSD. She wouldn't let us use the bathroom during what she called high-risk times, which turned out to be most of the day. She'd search our backpacks and volunteered to organize school shooting escape demonstrations. The real changes started after Thanksgiving break, because that's when she introduced us to the quiet game. I remember the first time she randomly screamed, "Threat, there's a threat!" During a math lesson, everyone froze before scrambling under their desks. This kid, Michael, started crying because he hit his knee on the metal bar and Miss Zen completely lost it. She made him lie on the floor while she dripped red paint on his shirt, saying, "This is what happens to loud children. They leak out and die." Michael's mom complained, but the principal just said Miss Zen was keeping us safe. Looking back, the school probably figured that at least Miss Zen was helping them avoid a lawsuit. She created these survivor scores on the board, ranking us by how quiet and fast we were during drills. I was stuck in the middle at number 15 and hated myself for caring about it. But when you saw how Miss Zen's face lit up for the top 5 kids, you wanted to be better at being quiet. She'd tell us stories about her old students while we hid under our desks. "Tyler breathed too loud," she'd whisper. I'd press my hands against my chest, trying to make it quieter. She made us wear only socks in class because sneakers make fatal sounds. She covered all the windows with what she called art projects, but were really survival maps showing hiding spots and exit routes. I helped her tape them up one afternoon and noticed my hands were shaking. "Good," she said. "Fear keeps you alert." We had to eat lunch at our desks in our hiding positions because attacks happened during transitions. Every subject became about survival. Math problems were about calculating response times, and history lessons were about children who didn't hide well enough. I stopped doing homework. What was the point of learning algebra when she kept telling us we probably wouldn't make it to 8th grade anyway? The week before everything went wrong was when things got really bad. On Monday, she locked this girl Emma in the supply closet for solo survival practice and forgot about her for 2 hours. I was in the bathroom when they found her, and I'll never forget how Emma looked when they brought her out. Her face was red and puffy, and she kept whimpering. I was good. I was quiet over and over. I threw up in the sink. Tuesday, she made us write goodbye letters to our parents so they'd have something if we failed. I wrote, "I love you, Mom and Dad," about 50 times because I couldn't think of anything else. The girl next to me, Katie, just drew pictures of her dog. Wednesday, she showed us actual news footage of school shootings on the smartboard, pointing out everything the kids did wrong. The kid in front of me wet his pants, and the smell filled the room, but Miss Zine didn't even notice. She just kept rewinding the same clip, saying, "See, he ran wrong." Thursday was a full day of silence training where nobody could talk or use the bathroom. Kids were crying silently by lunchtime, but she just nodded approvingly at our proper technique. Friday, she sent home a note saying, "Next week we're doing extended drills. Be prepared." My mom read it 3 times at dinner. Maybe I should call someone. She kept saying, but my dad just shook his head. "Miss Zen's the expert," he said. "She lived through it." I wanted to scream that we were living through something too, but I just asked to be excused. When the counselor tried to intervene, Miss Zen told her she'd have blood on her hands when her kids die. Monday morning started with her being extra jumpy. She initiated something she called survival and barricaded our door in 30 seconds using furniture she'd pre-positioned. She texted the principal, "It's happening again. I'm ready this time." Kids used buckets she'd hidden for bathrooms because no one leaves positions. She patrolled the room with scissors, calling them last resort protection, and kept saying, "We succeeded where my last class failed." That's when we heard it. Bang! Bang! GN shots. The color drained from my face. Miss Zen just smiled. She moved toward the window, peering through a gap in the survival maps. Her hands gripped the scissors tighter. The rest of us stayed frozen under our desks, some kids whimpering softly. I could hear Emma's breathing getting faster next to me. She'd been different since the closet incident. Jumpier, always watching the door. Another bang echoed from outside, then another. Miss Zen's smile widened. She turned to us with this look of pure satisfaction. "This is it, children. Everything we've practiced for." She started pushing more desks against the door, creating layers of barricades. "Remember your positions. Remember your training." Michael crawled deeper under his desk, the red paint stain still visible on his shirt from weeks ago. His mom had tried washing it out, but the mark remained. This permanent reminder of that horrible day. Katie clutched her goodbye letter, the one with all the dog drawings. I saw tears streaming down her face, but she didn't make a sound. We'd all gotten good at crying quietly. The principal's voice crackled over the intercom, shaky and uncertain. "This is a lockdown. This is not a drill. All teachers, secure your classrooms." Miss Zine actually laughed. She grabbed her emergency backpack and started pulling out supplies, laying them across her desk like she was preparing for surgery. Bandages, tourniquets, those scissors she called protection. I pressed myself further into the corner, trying to make myself smaller. My socks slipped on the floor as I adjusted my position. No shoes meant no noise, just like she'd taught us. The girl behind me, Sarah, tapped my shoulder. She mouthed something, but I couldn't understand. Her eyes were wide with panic. Miss Zen started her patrol pattern, the one she'd made us memorize. 5 steps to the window. Check outside. 3 steps to the door. Listen. Repeat. She moved like a soldier, precise and focused. "You're doing so well," she whispered to us. "So much better than my last class." More sounds from outside, shouting now, running feet. Miss Zen's expression shifted to something I'd never seen before. Pure determination mixed with something else. Pride, maybe. She looked at us like we were her greatest achievement. The doorknob rattled. Everyone tensed. Miss Zen raised the scissors, positioning herself between us and the door. "Stay down," she hissed. "No matter what happens, stay down and stay quiet." The rattling stopped. We waited. Seconds felt like hours. My legs were cramping from staying in the same position, but I didn't dare move. Miss Zen had drilled that into us. Movement meant death. Sound meant death. Everything meant death except perfect stillness and silence. Then came a voice from the hallway. "Miss Zen, this is Officer Peralta. We need you to open the door." She shook her head violently, pressing her back against the barricade. "That's what they'd say," she whispered to us. "That's exactly what they'd say to get us to open up." "Miss Scene, there's been a misunderstanding. Some construction workers dropped equipment outside. There's no threat. Please open the door." Construction workers. The words hit me like cold water. I looked around at my classmates, seeing the same realization dawn on their faces. But Miss Zen wasn't buying it. She clutched those scissors tighter, her knuckles white. "Nice try," she called out. "But I'm not falling for it. These children are under my protection." More voices joined Officer Peralta in the hallway. I recognized the principal's voice, then the counselors. They all kept saying the same thing: construction accident, false alarm, no danger. But Miss Scene had entered some other reality, one where she was the last line of defense for her students. She turned to us, her eyes wild. "They want me to fail again. They want me to let my guard down, but I won't. Not this time." She started crying, but her grip on the scissors never loosened. I couldn't save them before. But I can save you." The voices outside grew more urgent. Someone mentioned calling her emergency contact. Someone else suggested getting the maintenance staff to remove the door. Miss Dean heard it all and started piling more things against the door. Books, chairs, even the printer from her desk. "We can wait them out," she told us. "We have supplies. We have water. We can survive in here for days if we need to." She opened her emergency backpack again, pulling out protein bars and water bottles. "See, I planned for this." Emma started hyperventilating. The sound was soft, but in our silent room, it might as well have been a scream. Miss Zen's head snapped toward her. "No, no, no, we practiced this. Breathe through your nose quietly." But Emma couldn't stop. The panic attack was taking over. She gasped and wheezed, her whole body shaking. Miss Zen crawled over to her, still holding those scissors. "You have to be quiet. They'll hear you. They'll find us." I wanted to help Emma, but I was too scared to move. We all were. We just watched as Miss Zen tried to calm her down while simultaneously making everything worse. Something about Miss Zen's reaction to those construction sounds doesn't sit right with me. She's hearing what she expects to hear, not what's actually there. The way she clutches those scissors and calls them protection while her students are terrified makes me wonder if she really sees the difference between keeping them safe and becoming the danger herself. She kept talking about the other students, the ones who died, how they weren't quiet enough, weren't still enough. The pounding on the door intensified, multiple voices now, all trying to reason with Miss Scene. But she'd gone somewhere none of them could reach. She was back in that other classroom with those other students fighting a battle that had ended months ago. "Miss Scene," Officer Peralta's voice came through clearly. "We've contacted your sister. She's on her way. She wants to talk to you." That seemed to break through for a moment. Mrs. Face softened. "Helen," she whispered. Then she shook her head hard. "Number lying." "Helen wouldn't. She knows I have to protect them." She turned back to us, scanning our faces. Her gaze stopped on me. "You understand, don't you? Number 15. You've improved so much. You know why we do this?" I nodded, because what else could I do? My throat was too dry to speak, even if I'd wanted to. She smiled at me, this broken, desperate smile that made my stomach hurt. The maintenance staff had arrived. We could hear them working on the door hinges. Miss Zen heard it too. She became more frantic, checking and rechecking her barricades. She made us practice our positions again, crawling under desks, finding the optimal angles for hiding. "When they break through," she instructed, "stay completely still. Don't look at them. Don't respond to them. It could be a trick. Only move when I tell you it's safe." Katie raised her hand slightly, forgetting for a moment that we weren't supposed to move. Mrs. Eyes locked on her. "What?" she snapped. Katie's voice was barely audible. "I need to use the bathroom. Use the bucket. We've practiced this, but everyone will hear. Better they hear that than your screams when they find you in the hallway." Katie started crying harder, but silently, her shoulders shaking. Michael had curled into a ball under his desk. Sarah was rocking back and forth. Emma's breathing had gotten worse. We were all falling apart, and Miss Zen couldn't see it. Or maybe she could, and thought this was still better than the alternative she'd lived through. The door hinges squealed as the maintenance staff worked. Miss Zen positioned herself in front of us, scissors raised, ready to defend us against an enemy that didn't exist. "Remember," she said, her voice steady despite everything, "I won't let them hurt you. Not like before." The maintenance crews drill wind against the metal hinges. Miss Scene gripped the scissors so tightly her whole arm trembled. She backed away from the door, herding us deeper into the corner with frantic hand gestures. Emma's hyperventilating had turned into silent sobbing, her chest heaving as she struggled for air. I watched Miss Zen's face contort between fear and determination, like she was fighting some invisible battle inside her head. The first hinge popped free. Messine let out a strangled cry and started dragging the heavy teacher's desk toward the door. Her emergency backpack spilled open, medical supplies scattering across the floor, gauze rolls unraveled, bottles of antiseptic rolled under desks. She didn't notice. She just kept pushing furniture, building her fortress higher. Michael threw up. The smell hit immediately in our enclosed space. Some kids gagged. Miss Zen whirled around, her eyes wild. She crawled over to Michael, pressing a hand over his mouth, even though he'd already finished. She whispered frantically about staying quiet, about how the enemy could track us by smell. Michael's eyes bulged with terror above her hand. The second hinge gave way. Voices in the hallway grew louder. I recognized Mrs. A. Peterson from next door asking what was happening. Someone mentioned calling the fire department. Miss Zine heard it all. She released Michael and scrambled back to her barricade, trying to wedge a filing cabinet against the loosening door. Katie couldn't hold it anymore. She crawled toward the bucket in the corner, but her shaking hands knocked it over. The metal clang echoed through the room. Miss Zen spun around, her face twisted with panic and rage. She pointed the scissors at Katie, who froze mid-crawl. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Miss Zen seemed to remember we were her students, not threats. She lowered the scissors, but her hands kept shaking. She motioned for Katie to return to her spot. Katie crawled back, leaving a small puddle where she'd been. The shame on her face made my chest tight. The door shifted. Light from the hallway leaked through the growing gap. Miss Zen threw her whole body against the barricade, but the maintenance crew was stronger. Inch by inch, the door opened wider. We could see shadows moving outside, adult voices discussing evacuation procedures. Someone mentioned paramedics were on standby. Miss Zine turned to us one more time. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with sweat. She looked at each of us like she was memorizing our faces, like she was saying goodbye. She raised the scissors again, but this time pointed them at the door, ready to fight whoever came through. The door finally gave way. Officer Peralta stepped through first, his hands raised peacefully. Behind him stood the principal, the counselor, and several other teachers. They all looked terrified, not of some shooter, but of what they saw in our classroom. 27 kids huddled under desks, some crying, some catatonic, one covered in his own vomit, another sitting in her own urine. Miss Zen lunged forward with the scissors. Officer Peralta caught her wrist easily, gently prying the weapon away. She collapsed against him, sobbing about her students, about Tyler who breathed too loud, about failing us like she'd failed them. He held her while she broke apart completely. The principal rushed in, telling us it was safe to come out, but none of us moved. We'd been trained too well. We stayed frozen in our positions until the counselor started coaxing us out one by one. Emma had to be carried. She'd gone completely rigid, her eyes staring at nothing. Paramedics arrived. They checked us over while we sat in the hallway wrapped in those silver emergency blankets. Parents started showing up, their faces white with fear and fury. Michael's mom took one look at the red paint stain on his shirt and started screaming at the principal. Katie's dad held her while she cried about the accident. Emma's parents rode with her in the ambulance. They led Miss Zine away eventually. She kept looking back at us, still trying to protect us from dangers that weren't there. I heard her telling Officer Peralta about the construction workers, how it was a trick, how they'd almost gotten us. He just nodded sadly and guided her toward the exit. The school called an emergency assembly. They brought in counselors to talk to us about trauma and healing. But how could they understand? We'd been living in Mrs. Nightmare for months. We'd learned to fear the sound of our own breathing. We'd practiced dying every single day. That night, my parents sat on either side of my bed. My mom kept smoothing my hair while my dad held my hand. They asked me to tell them everything, so I did. I told them about the survivor scores, about eating lunch and hiding positions, about the goodbye letters. My mom cried. My dad's jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. The next morning, they didn't make me go to school. Neither did most other parents. The parking lot was nearly empty. They'd brought in a substitute teacher, Mrs. Young, who seemed nice enough. But the few kids who showed up just sat there staring at her, waiting for her to scream about threats. Emma didn't come back for 2 weeks. When she finally did, she was different, quieter, if that was possible. She sat in the back corner where she could see all the exits. During a routine fire drill, she locked herself in the bathroom and wouldn't come out for an hour. Michael's parents pulled him out completely, enrolled him in private school across town. His mom sent a letter to the school board describing what Miss Zen had done. She used words like psychological torture and child endangerment. The letter got passed around at the next PTA meeting. Parents were furious. Katie started seeing a therapist. She told me the therapist made her practice using the bathroom without feeling ashamed. It sounded stupid until I realized I'd been holding it all day too, afraid to ask permission. We'd all been trained to ignore our basic needs. The school board called a special meeting. Parents packed the auditorium. One by one, they stood up and described what their children had been through. My mom went up there, her voice shaking as she read from the goodbye letter I'd written. Other parents held up their kids' letters. Some just held up photos of the red paint stains that wouldn't wash out. The principal tried to defend himself. He talked about Miss Zen's experience, her expertise in survival situations, but parents weren't having it. Someone's dad, a big man with a construction company logo on his shirt, stood up and asked how painting children with red dye was expertise. The principal couldn't answer. They announced Miss Zen was on indefinite administrative leave. She was getting help, they said. Professional treatment for her trauma. But what about our trauma? What about the 27 kids who couldn't hear a loud noise without diving under furniture? Mrs. Young tried her best with our class. She brought in soft lighting and played calm music. She let us use the bathroom whenever we wanted. She never raised her voice, but we were broken in ways she couldn't fix. Half the class was on anxiety medication by Christmas. Several kids transferred to other schools. I started having nightmares, not about shooters, but about Miss Scene. In my dreams, she'd appear in my bedroom holding those scissors, telling me I was breathing too loud. I'd wake up gasping, pressing my hands against my chest, trying to make it quieter. I'm trying to understand how Mrs. Brain made her see construction workers as threats, like her mind created this whole different reality where normal sounds became danger signals. How does trauma rewire someone's perception that completely? My parents found me sleeping in my closet more than once. The school brought in a trauma specialist. Dr. Reeves was young and tried too hard to be cool, but she understood what we'd been through. She didn't minimize it or tell us to move on. She acknowledged that we'd been hurt by someone who was supposed to protect us. That made it worse somehow, but also better. We did group sessions where we talked about our experiences. At first, nobody wanted to speak. We'd been trained that silence meant survival, but slowly, kids started sharing. Sarah talked about how she still couldn't wear shoes indoors. A boy named Marcus admitted he'd wet himself 3 times since the lockdown because he was afraid to leave his hiding spot. Dr. Reeves taught us grounding techniques, ways to remind ourselves we were safe when the panic hit. She made us practice normal classroom sounds, raising hands, asking questions, things that had become foreign to us. It felt like learning to be students all over again. Some parents wanted to press charges against Miss Zen. They hired lawyers and talked about lawsuits, but it got complicated. Miss Zen was in a psychiatric facility. Her sister Helen came to a school board meeting and begged for understanding. She showed photos of Miss Zen before the shooting, smiling with her old students. Then she showed a photo from after. 26 memorial programs spread across the table. Miss Zen had kept them all. The district settled out of court. They paid for our therapy and implemented new policies about teacher mental health screenings, but money couldn't undo what happened. It couldn't give us back the months we'd spent preparing to die. I ran into Miss Zen 6 months later. My mom had taken me to the pharmacy to pick up my anxiety medication. Miss Zen was there looking smaller somehow, deflated. She saw me and froze. I could see her wanting to come over, wanting to ask if I was okay, if I was staying safe. My mom stepped between us, not aggressively, just protectively. Miss Zen nodded like she understood and turned away, but I saw her shoulders shaking as she left. Part of me wanted to tell her I was okay, that I didn't blame her, but I wasn't okay, and I did blame her at least a little. The 1-year anniversary of the lockdown came around. The school wanted to do a memorial or something, but parents shut that down fast. We didn't need reminders. We carried them every day, in the way we flinched at sudden noises, in the way we always noted exits, in the way we still ate lunch quickly, quietly, ready to hide at any moment. Some kids recovered faster than others. Katie made friends at her new school and seemed almost normal by spring, but Emma still couldn't handle enclosed spaces. Michael's mom told my mom he was doing better, but still had the red-stained shirt hanging in his closet. She'd tried to throw it away, but he'd retrieved it from the trash. Said he needed it to remember. I fell somewhere in the middle. I could function. I went to school, did my homework, even joined the art club, but I wasn't the same kid who'd walked into Miss Zen's classroom that first day. None of us were. We'd learned too much about fear, about survival, about how the people meant to protect you could become the very thing you needed protection from. Dr. Reeves said healing wasn't linear. Some days were better than others. Some days I could almost forget. But then a door would slam or the intercom would crackle and I'd be right back under that desk trying to breathe quieter, trying to be invisible, trying to survive. The school district hired a new principal. Mr. Jameson had a background in child psychology and actually listened when parents spoke. He removed all the door stops Miss Zen had installed, but added panic buttons that went straight to the police. Real safety measures, not the theatrical kind. Our class got split up for 8th grade. They thought it would help us move on if we weren't all together, constantly reminding each other of what happened. Maybe they were right, but we still found each other at lunch sometimes, drawn together by shared experience. We didn't talk about it, but we didn't need to. We could see it in each other's eyes. Miss Zen sent letters to some of us. They came through our parents who decided whether to share them. My mom let me read mine. It was hard to get through. She apologized over and over. She explained about Tyler and the others, how their faces haunted her, how she just wanted to save us. She said she understood if I hated her. She said she was getting help. I didn't write back. What would I even say? That I understood? That I forgave her? I wasn't there yet. Maybe I never would be. But I kept the letter, tucked it in a drawer with my goodbye letter to my parents. 2 pieces of evidence of how fear could twist love into something harmful. The news tried to pick up the story once. A reporter called our house asking for interviews. My dad told them off in language I'd never heard him use before. Other parents did the same. We didn't want to be a headline. We didn't want our trauma packaged for consumption, we just wanted to heal. By the time I started high school, I could almost pass for normal. I'd learned to manage the anxiety to push through the panic, but I still sat near exits. I still noticed loud noises. I still sometimes caught myself breathing too quietly, pressing my hands against my chest like Miss Zen had taught us. They said Miss Zen was doing better, too, living with her sister, working part-time at a garden center. No more teaching. The district had made sure of that. Sometimes I wondered if she still had nightmares, too. If she woke up trying to save students who were already gone. If she ever forgave herself for turning her trauma into ours. The following week, Miss Zen started showing up at our houses. The first time she appeared at my front door, my mom grabbed the phone immediately, while my dad blocked the doorway. Miss Zen stood there clutching a manila folder, her hair unwashed, wearing the same cardigan she'd worn during the lockdown. She kept insisting she had important safety information for us. My dad shut the door firmly while my mom called the police. Emma's family got a restraining order after Miss Zen followed Emma home from her therapy appointment. The paperwork process took 3 days, during which Miss Zen left 17 voicemails on their home phone. Each message contained detailed instructions about proper hiding techniques and reminders about breathing exercises. Emma's mom played one for the judge, who signed the order immediately. Other families started reporting similar encounters. Miss Zen would appear at grocery stores, parks, anywhere she might find her former students. She'd approached with that same desperate look, trying to hand out homemade safety pamphlets. Parents formed a phone tree to warn each other about sightings. The school implemented new security measures. They hired an additional guard and installed cameras at all entrances. Teachers received training on recognizing concerning behavior, but Miss Zen kept finding ways around the restrictions. She'd wait across the street, just outside school property, watching us arrive and leave. I started taking different routes home. My mom would pick me up at random times, sometimes from the back entrance, sometimes from the gym. We developed our own safety protocols, but these were about avoiding Miss Zen, not imaginary threats. The irony wasn't lost on me. One afternoon, I forgot to wait for my mom and walked out the main entrance alone. Miss Zen was there instantly, appearing from behind a parked car. She grabbed my arm, not hard but firm enough to stop me. Her eyes darted around frantically as she pressed a folded paper into my hand. I pulled away and ran back inside, my heart pounding. The paper contained a hand-drawn map of my neighborhood with hiding spots marked in red ink. The situation escalated when Miss Zen broke into the school one night. The janitor found her in our old classroom arranging desks into defensive positions. She'd brought supplies, more emergency kits, updated evacuation maps, even a box of those awful red paint bottles. The police arrested her for trespassing, but she was released the next morning. Dr. Reeves held an emergency session with our group. We sat in a circle processing this new development. Sarah's hands shook as she described seeing Miss Zen outside her bedroom window. Marcus admitted he'd been sleeping in his parents' room again. The fear we'd been working to overcome came flooding back, but this time the threat was real, just different than what Miss Zen had prepared us for. Parents organized a meeting without school administration. They gathered in someone's living room, comparing notes, sharing strategies. My mom came home with a list of legal options and phone numbers for advocacy groups. The consensus was clear. Something had to change. Miss Zen's sister, Helen, reached out to several families, apologizing profusely. She explained that Miss Zen had stopped taking her medication, convinced that we were still in danger. Helen had tried to get her committed for psychiatric evaluation, but Miss Zen had fled before the paperwork went through. She was staying in motel, living off her savings, dedicating every moment to protecting students who didn't want her protection. The breaking point came during a school basketball game. Miss Zen somehow got into the gym and pulled the fire alarm. As everyone evacuated, she ran onto the court with a megaphone, shouting instructions about proper exit strategies. She demonstrated drop-and-crawl techniques while security tried to catch her. Several younger kids started crying, not understanding what was happening. 3 parents tackled her near the bleachers. She fought them, still yelling about keeping everyone safe. The megaphone skittered across the floor, her voice echoing off the walls, even without it. Miss Zen's transformation from safety-obsessed teacher to actual safety hazard really puts a new spin on those who can't do teach. Except now she can't do either, and just stalks kids with homemade maps instead. Officer Peralta arrived and had to physically carry her out while she screamed about our vulnerability, about how we weren't ready, about how she'd failed us again. This time, the psychiatric hold stuck. Helen signed the papers, and Miss Zen was admitted to a facility 2 hours away. The evaluation period would last at least 30 days with potential for longer treatment depending on her progress. We learned this through a carefully worded letter the school sent home, trying to balance privacy concerns with our need for information. The relief in our classroom was palpable. Kids started raising their hands again without flinching. Bathroom breaks became normal occurrences. We could drop pencils without everyone diving for cover. Mrs. Young gradually removed the excessive safety equipment, replacing Miss Zen's survival maps with actual student artwork, but recovery wasn't instant. Emma still sat by the door. Michael's red-stained shirt remained in his closet. I caught myself checking windows and doorways, not for shooters, but for Miss Zen. The habits she'd drilled into us had become part of our muscle memory. Dr. Reeves introduced exposure therapy techniques. We practiced being loud on purpose, stomping our feet and clapping our hands. It felt rebellious and terrifying at first. Some kids couldn't do it. Katie burst into tears the first time she was asked to shout. But gradually, we reclaimed our ability to exist normally in space. The school district faced serious scrutiny. An investigation revealed that warning signs about Miss Dean's deteriorating mental health had been ignored for months. Teachers had reported concerns that were dismissed. Parents' complaints had been minimized. The principal who called her an expert resigned quietly over winter break. Our parents pursued accountability through proper channels. They attended every school board meeting, spoke at public comment periods, and demanded policy changes. The district eventually agreed to mandatory mental health screenings for all staff, better training for recognizing trauma responses, and a clearer protocol for addressing parent concerns. Some families left the district entirely. Michael's parents had already moved him to private school, but others followed. Our class of 27 dwindled to 19 by spring. Empty desks served as reminders of the damage done, though these kids were alive somewhere else. Just healing in different environments. I learned to manage the hypervigilance through specific techniques. When I caught myself scanning for threats, I'd name 5 things I could see that were safe. The clock, the whiteboard, my backpack, the window showing a sunny day, my friend's smile. It helped ground me in reality rather than miss scenes manufactured dangers. The hardest part was explaining to other kids who hadn't been in our class. They'd ask why we were weird about certain things, why we flinched at announcements, why we ate lunch so fast. How could we explain months of psychological conditioning? Most of us just said we had a strict teacher and left it at that. Helen sent another letter in spring updating us on Miss Zen's progress. She was responding to treatment, beginning to understand how her trauma had affected us. She wanted to apologize properly, but her doctors advised against direct contact. Helen included a photo of Miss Zen working in the facility's garden, looking healthier, but still carrying that sadness in her eyes. By the end of 7th grade, our class had developed its own strange bond. We weren't friends exactly, but we understood each other in ways nobody else could. We'd check on each other subtly, making sure everyone was okay when fire drills happened or when substitute teachers arrived. We were survivors of something unique and damaging. The 8th grade transition helped. Being mixed with other students diluted the intensity of our shared experience. New kids didn't know our history, treating us normally. We could practice being regular students without the weight of what had happened defining every interaction. Mr. Jameson, the new principal, implemented positive changes gradually. He focused on creating a genuinely safe environment without the paranoia. Real emergency procedures were practiced monthly, but treated as routine preparations, not life or death scenarios. Teachers received trauma-informed training that actually helped. I saw Emma at high school orientation the following year. She still preferred seats by exits, but could sit through entire classes without checking the door. We nodded at each other in recognition, but didn't talk about Miss Zen. That chapter was closing, even if its effects lingered. The district settled with all affected families by that summer. The amount wasn't life-changing, but covered therapy costs and acknowledged harm done. More importantly, they committed to preventing similar situations. A new oversight committee included parent representatives who had real input on safety policies. Miss Zen remained in treatment, eventually transitioning to outpatient care while living with Helen. The restraining orders stayed in place, but she never attempted contact again. Sometimes I wondered if she still thought about us, if she still felt that desperate need to protect children from dangers that might never come. Our story never made headlines or inspired dramatic changes. We were just 27 kids who survived a teacher's breakdown, who learned too young that good intentions could cause real harm. We adapted because we had to, finding ways to reclaim our sense of safety from someone who tried to steal it while believing she was giving it to us. Years later, I'd still catch myself breathing too quietly in stressful moments, but I'd remember Dr. Reeves's techniques, ground myself in the present, and breathe normally again. We all carried pieces of that year with us, but we'd learned to live with them, to move forward despite the weight. That was our real survival skill, not hiding under desks or staying silent, but continuing on after someone we trusted confused their trauma with ours. Thanks for letting me tag along while we poked holes in everything today. Definitely made for some interesting wonderings. See you around. Like the video. It helps more than you think.